My name is Kakabo Kai Golinganikusupile. I trade as Kat Kai Kolkes.
My name is James. I'm from Florida. Lived here in Brooklyn now for 10 years, New York perhaps 14 or so. And I suppose I came from a fairly traditional military family. Right? My father was in the Navy, my mother was a teacher, continues to be a teacher, and they're from the north, from Wisconsin.
I'm an artivist, a human rights practitioner, and a communication specialist. What I've tried to do with my art as someone who's concerned with gender and sexuality politics, which are often seen as the unspoken things in our lives. So I just wanted to get people, or give people, an opportunity to start thinking about where they believe what they've inherited and where they don't believe in what they've inherited.
I have a family of my own now. We have been married for almost going on 15 years. 2 children, a daughter who's 10 and a son who's about to turn 8. Fairly, traditional, traditional just man, sort of pronouns, myself, he, no pronouns games.
I identify as trans, and for ease of use, I use she, her pronouns. But if we were to operate in English without all the gender complications, I would just really be fine with being Kat. It's really tricky considering the fact that I've, in my work, started going back to my mother tongue, and my mother tongue is Setswana. Setswana is a gender-neutral language, and I've stopped caring about gender. What presentation means is a whole different thing. But for me, looking like I stepped out of a page of Vogue, or looking like I've just been farming, are not gender differences. And I know that to anyone in the audience, or even to myself, the page of Vogue would automatically mean femme, and farming would automatically mean masculine. As I have such a beautiful inspiration, which is my mother, who will look like she just stepped out of a page of Vogue while she's farming. And that's part of why I do the work that I do, is to get people to start unpacking what they mean when they say she, what they mean when they say he, what are the expectations once they've said that pronoun.
Certainly in terms of what's happening these days, and a dramatic shift in focus for women in equality, in sort of the Me Too movement. Myself as a man, I just sort of a non-event. I think certainly in comparison to what would it be like if I were a woman, I guess perhaps. Maybe there would be a lot different, But I just never really thought, I guess, historically, about what it meant to be a man. Certainly nowadays, I think I do spend a lot more time about what that might mean.
I do still think that there are people who are suffering. I've called it suffering masculinity, because I consider masculinity to have now become a bit of a condition as opposed to an identity.
If I do think of the type of person my father is, for example, he is, very much a product of the military, and your own bootstraps. We don't really need any help. Don't ask anybody for your help. You're going to figure it on your own, right? And actually, that's been a strong personal identifying trait for myself as well. This, to go and ask someone for help, no, I'm not going to ask anybody for help. You're going to figure it out on your own. And I think those, that's what it means to be a boy. Don't, yeah, you just sort of, you sort yourself out, you figure yourself out, and like you don't ask for help.
It is something that you end up becoming a victim to without knowing that you're a victim. And when you're conscious of the fact that you are in possession of whatever masculinity or masculinities there are, then for the most part, you don't perform what is then called masculinity, right? So you wouldn't be the kind of person who ends up on the cover of Men's Health. You would more often than not be considered a thinker. And I think that's a problem when we start looking at masculinity as just absolutely like non-thinking, brutish, unintelligent. As soon as you show an ounce of intelligence or eloquence or fashion or style, you are found, something is then put as feminine or feminized.
I consider myself, I'm a sort of a musician and an engineer, right? And I think in the engineering side, it's all about sort of, profession and meritocracy and sort of, absolute correctness. And there might be multiple ways of arriving at a right conclusion, but it's really about, it doesn't really matter how you got there, but did you get the right solution? And I'm also a musician, and I started my path down musicianship as a drummer, but specifically as a very sort of rudimentary technical style of drumming. And, very, very early on in my, 13 years old, 14 years old, I really loved, back at that time, progressive rock. And again, it's all about this sort of technical proficiency in just, merit without necessarily any thought of like, is it good? And those themes about just sort of, correctness and meritocracy and good and success at all costs, rather than like, is it good? Does it have a good mood? Is it good for other people? Like, is it only that you're better? And, those things play out in so many areas, I've spent my career now very much in, large, hermetically sealed corporate America, and those themes are still very much at play, sort of technical proficiency, win at all cost. It doesn't really matter how you get there, but we're going to win this. This is a zero-sum game, and we're going to win.
I also wanted people to start figuring out the differences between masculinity, patriarchy, and misogyny, which end up being put into this violent space altogether, where masculinity doesn't have to be violent. Misogyny is inherently a violent thing, but patriarchy is not the lack of feminist or like matriarchal power. So what then becomes that push and pull between, patriarchy and matriarchy, and looking at them as terms that are apparently gendered, but I think they're more sex oriented than they are gender oriented. So I wanted to get people thinking through, what does masculinity look like if it comes with long hair, breasts, and painted nails?
Now I see, after all this time, there's a lot more to it, In the corporate world, there definitely should be and can be a lot more to it. Absolutely in music, if there wasn't any more than proficiency, I think progressive rock would be a lot more popular than it is, right? There's just a lot more to it, and we've sacrificed a lot along the way for winning.
More often than not, people call a boy child a little man, but girl children are never called little women. You're constantly looking at womanhood as this thing that, yes, you become it, but then it disappears under manness. Whereas manness is forever loading. It's like you're ready. You can be a man at the age of 12. You can be a man at the age of 3. But you can't be a woman at the age of 6. You need to be a princess, you need to be soft, you need to be delicate.
growing up, we probably moved every 2 or 3 years, following from one Navy base to the other. And my father was frequently stationed on board the ships, and so he's away on cruise for, 6, 7, 8, 9 months at a time. So even though we had a fairly traditional family, and when we weren't away, we definitely had a fairly suburban lifestyle, but very frequently it was just the three of us, my mother, my brother, and I.
I grew up in a little town which is considered the second city of Botswana. It's Francistown. It was a wonderful childhood, teenagehood. I went to South Africa when I was 18 and that was my first time not living in a house. So I was in boarding school. I wasn't accountable to anyone's rules. I had my own space. I was able to really just start thinking about, okay, if there's no one to check how I look before I present myself to the world, what do I look like?
I was sort of definitely kind of a backyard scientist. I had a little chemistry, like for, my birthday, I get like a chemistry set and, go play and, make chemical reactions in the backyard. We lived out on the last neighborhood in our suburb, and behind us was a bunch of trees, and this is Florida, so it's all palm trees. And a friend of ours' father, who ran a pool construction company, dug a big trench out in the woods, and we covered the trench with palmetto leaves and like prayed army and fort, and just very very adventurous and investigative and curious. Yeah, just get out there and get dirty and have fun. Maybe it's a cliche, but that's what it was for me.
My mother and I used to have people call us twins. When Sunday going to church was somehow we would end up picking the same color palette. So it was kind of like, okay, great. So expressing yourself through fashion, my mother took herself seriously enough in the way of saying, how you meet people, how you present yourself to people is the first sign of respect, not just of them, but of yourself. So look good. And that contributed to one of my sayings, which is, life's too short to wear a bad outfit. And when I walk out of the house, if I were to be run over by a car, or however I meet my demise, I want someone somewhere to say, you know what, that's a good outfit.
There's actually a pretty popular managerial book out there if you're into reading business manager type literature. And it's, what got you here won't get you there, right? And that was actually pretty good, this sort of, just figuring it out, never ask for help. That'll serve you extremely well, and I think it did serve me very, very well through, certainly through high school and college. I guess a little anecdote, my brother and I actually moved out when we were quite young, so my brother became my parental guardian when I was 15, and this thing you just, don't ask for help, you just do it, right? And this theme was very, 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 very good for me. I think now I would say now where I am in my career structure, and actually, frankly, other parts of my personal life as well, I don't think I can really grow any further without asking for help.